Hello, everyone, and welcome to Project Zomboid. I'm joined here today by Dan,
Hello.
and today this is kind of a follow-up to our The Walking Dead Survival Instinct video, in which we really just kind of talked about the show and everything that's been going on in it up until this point. But we recorded that with 2 episodes left until the finale, which of course we have now seen, and we have a lot of thoughts to say on that. Now, before we get started, those of you who were watching the show and stopped at some point, I need to settle all your fears right now because Jerry survived the show, so we pretty much got the best ending we could have hoped for. Everything after that is just gravy. So where do we want to start on this?
So I think the end of our survival instinct video was kind of a salty tone, and I think we had a lot of fears for what the end of the show could be, and luckily I think most of those fears were kind of alleviated by the finale.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know what people are saying about it. I mean, I gave up on the subreddit like years ago, but I actually was really, really happy with the way it ended. And that's saying something because I really was not expecting to like it. I expected, because as we all know, the Walking Dead universe has been AMC's big focus for the past couple of years, and they're really hyping it hard for 2023, and I really thought that it was just going to be an ad for a bunch of spin-offs. I thought that with all the things they were setting up, they wouldn't do the thing like in the comics where we flash forward 25 years. And they didn't, but I was actually, even though they did set up the spin-offs, I was actually really satisfied with how they showed that as an ending.
Yeah, they had like every opportunity to go like full on like fan service. Not even fan service. I don't think anyone would have liked it. But just like full on like, hey, remember this? Or like, oh, look what's coming. We don't need to end our show. And I think they found a way to sidestep that every step of the way. They always had like an opportunity to do something like dumb and gimmicky, and they managed to make it work in the context of the show. And as a result, the ending isn't as all-encompassing. I don't think it's as satisfying as the comic book ending, but I think it's probably as satisfying as we could have ever hoped for the ending of the show to be, given all that it became in culture.
Yeah, because they did sort of have this responsibility where they couldn't really end the story, which in the context of the show, you know, it makes sense that there wouldn't be any like true endings. Like there's not really going to be a happily ever after, but you can get pretty close to that while still implying that there's still story to tell, and I think they did that pretty well. Now, I think we'll structure this at first, and Dan does have his notepad here, points that we want to cover. But before we get going, I think I'll tell you how I wanted it to sort of end, and compare and contrast that with what actually happened, because I want to hear your thoughts on my idea for an ending, and kind of compare that to how it actually went down. So I was thinking that I was really impressed with all of Season 11, how they actually retained the Whisperers as an important element of the show. Because it's always been a big deal how... I don't want to say they always did it, but the show had a bad problem with not referencing earlier events. Like, a plot would get done, and they would just kind of move on from it and never talk about it again, and it just made it feel like... It kind of made it feel like every villain was a villain of the week. So in Season 11, when they started actually having like a lot of references to the Whisperers, and our characters using Whisperer tactics a lot, particularly against the Reapers, I was really happy with that. And so I was really thinking that what should happen was, because what we've seen is our characters basically becoming the apocalypse, to go back to Season 1, you know, Jenner was scary to our protagonists because he was telling them it is never going to go back to the way it was. And then by the time of Season 11, when we get around to the Commonwealth is scary to our people. They're villains because they're trying to put it back to the way it was. Our characters have become the apocalypse. In essence, they are the end of the world. And so that's why I thought, at least in the time leading up to the finale, that what should happen is Maggie should put together a mega herd and lead it to the Commonwealth, which she should then show to Pamela and basically say, listen, screw with us and we bring this entire thing down on you. Now, that doesn't really constitute a satisfying finale, now that I've had time to think about it. There has to be something else there. And even though I'm disappointed we didn't get something like that, I think the finale that we got is that missing piece that my idea is missing.
Yeah. So, for those, I guess, who don't care about the ending of the show essentially sees pretty much a random herd. Or no, it's not a random herd.
It wasn't a random herd. I think what they established, or at least I think what they were trying to imply, is that Pamela's basically tactic for any time there's civil unrest is that she stirs a herd, has it come in so that she can basically declare an emergency and basically settle everybody down for the time being.
Yeah.
And usually they've forgotten about whatever they're doing by the time it's over.
Yeah, but it gets kind of out of her hands because of a great number of factors. Some involving our people, some just involving the unpredictable nature of the apocalypse, which is like the one thing that like the Commonwealth and like Pamela's like whole ideology couldn't really get around is the fact that like the world can be unpredictable. That's like the one thing that kind of differentiates our group from every other group we've encountered, is that they have a better handle of the concept of uncertainty than a lot of other people. And the herd ends up arriving at Pamela's like estates, which are her like rich people enclave in the...
Well, I guess before we get into that, we should probably talk about like the main reason why this happened, which is she brought this herd down to calm the unrest that was happening in the Commonwealth because of, like, you know, our group had basically been making the Commonwealth aware of some of the shady nature of the Commonwealth, and as a result, a lot of Pamela's practices that she had always been doing to enrich herself and basically like the upper class had kind of come to light. And so she brings this herd down to try and quell that unrest, and it ends up actually getting inside the Commonwealth because of the variants. And basically what they are is actually a callback to Season 1. If you'll remember, back in Season 1, when Frank Darabont was in charge, zombies could do things like try door handles, a few of them could climb ladders, we saw them climb a fence and use tools like a rock to break open a glass window. And what we sort of learn is that, and sort of was hinted at the end of The World Beyond, is that there are variants of whatever infection causes this zombie outbreak. And so, I bit off more than I could chew here. And so, what we mostly see that as in the show is climbing. And they are capable of just like slightly more intelligent, slightly more physical behavior. And I was actually very happy with how they handled that, because when they started teasing that, you know, they showed the trailer of Aaron being like, I've heard stories of some that can like climb walls and open doors. And I thought, oh no, they're doing Special Infected. It's going to be so stupid. And I was pretty happy with the way they handled it, which is that they're just slightly more capable. And I think that was a decent way to do it. That zombie has a gun, so I want it. Frank
Darabont always said that when he was showrunner, that he wanted the zombies to be as capable as the first zombie in Night of the Living Dead. And we see him like pick up a rock. He can basically run. I think we might see him climb at some point too. So it's not like there's like Special Infected, and then there's like, you know, basically the original zombie was able to do all of that stuff. Yeah. So it's not too far out there.
So in a way, it kind of goes back and like almost sort of justifies one of the longest standing, not plot holes, but just inconsistencies. And I think that was a decent way of doing it. It's a way to make the zombies more of a threat in a way that doesn't necessarily feel cheesy, except for the obvious, like, you know, if these have been a thing the whole time, how come we're only now seeing them again?
Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there.
And also the characters acting kind of surprised when they see them. Seems a little out of place, because it's like in the, not the finale, but the second to last episode, like Negan sees one, not even really climb, just kind of like stumble on top of something, and he's like the most like surprised we've ever seen him, and it's like, we've seen them do that before, even when they weren't on this whole like variant idea. So it was forced in a way, but not nearly as badly as the trailers made it seem.
Yeah, like I'm sure AMC pulled it like as, a means for the Daryl spinoff, but at the same time, it's not like it's without precedent.
Yeah. It's understandable. That was one of the things that kind of came across as weird to me. Not even necessarily for the finale, but more like the last 4 or 5 episodes. Is it seemed like a weird time to reintroduce it. That's what I was saying. So the herd. Oh yeah, I was just kind of explaining what the auspices for the whole ending is, so that there's a good groundwork for if anybody's listening who didn't watch it and doesn't care, so they can at least understand what we're going on about when we're talking about any of our other points.
Right. So basically, the thing you have to understand, just because this would be kind of hard to follow if we just continue where we left off. So basically, at this point, the herd, for various reasons, has infiltrated the Commonwealth. They're now roaming the streets, and everybody is coming up with their various plans for how to deal with it.
Yeah. And Pamela's big strategy basically is to abandon the Commonwealth largely, kind of because they know they'll be able to take care of it given enough time, and basically get all of herself, what's left of her family, and her friends to make sure they're safe in this area that we kind of just learned about called the Estates.
Which is basically the inner sanctum where all the rich people live.
Yeah. And the herd
It's very Land of the Dead in that way.
Yeah. The herd ends up basically right at the gates there. And our group shows up essentially essentially threatening to let the herd in if Pamela doesn't act and save all of her people.
Right, because Pamela's plan is basically to redirect the herd to the lower districts, the lower wards, I think she calls them.
Yeah.
Basically sacrifice all the poor of the Commonwealth, which is most of the population, to protect the elites. And so people have kind of caught wind of that. There's basically these huge groups of people at the gates of the estates, begging to be let in. And of course there's all these soldiers here, because the entire military has fallen back to the estates. They're not protecting the people. And a piece of imagery that I like, Fear the Walking Dead actually did it first, but a piece of imagery that I actually like is we see what is essentially a herd of humans clamoring at the gates.
Yeah.
I like seeing that classic zombie imagery that we've seen so many times before, but it's people, and we're rooting for them to get in.
Yeah. That's it ties together Gabriel's story in a way that I think works really nice. I thought they were just going to kill Gabriel at the end, because it's kind of hard to tell where he was going to go because of how the turns his story took. His story got very bleak and very dark in the past few seasons, but it was good to see that it was actually Gabriel was the one who ends up letting the people in at the end, because I didn't expect him to get a full circle kind of story, and I was really glad to see that he did.
Especially with how what a cynical direction they had taken his character in this season.
But I like that he still maintains that, though. He has this really cool line where he's just walking past a whole line of soldiers, and they're all aiming guns at him, and he just goes, "I'm letting them in. Anybody who tries to stop me is going to get shot."
Yeah.
It's just a very God, Gabriel is so cool towards the end.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that the show has always been about, and it's the reason some people say that it went on too long. I will never say that it made the most of its time. It didn't even make the most of its time in season 11. But it needed to be a long show because such a big part of it is seeing how these characters evolve over time. I mean, every once in a while you would look and the group would be just doing stuff, and Negan will just be another face in that group of people moving around, and that is such a bizarre thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's another good point. Oh, so the general finale is they end up letting the people in, and then our group they're the baddest, the best of the best. They're able to handle the zombie threat because they always have. It's kind of, you're not even really concerned about the zombies watching it. You're kind of just concerned to see what happens to the Commonwealth by the end of it, because after a certain point you kind of know that our characters are not going to die. Though some do in this episode.
And it was largely at actor request.
Yeah. But I think they even made that work. But they're able to basically blow up the whole horde, along with the entirety of the estates, basically. They essentially flip it. And they arrest Pamela for being just terrible. And at this point, a legit murderer.
Everybody knows she shot Judith at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, by the way, spoiler alert, that happened.
Yeah, Judith got shot. It didn't really end up mattering too much.
Yeah, she's just kind of fine.
Yeah. You know, I'm not going to sit here and say that it was like a perfect ending, but I think it was as good as we could have hoped for.
Yeah, I was expecting it to be really bad because I did not have any faith in what they had set up at the end of the second to last episode.
Yeah. The ending of the second to last episode, I feel like the second to last episode on its own is a good episode, but when like you don't know where it's going to go and you're like, we don't have any time left, it's really frustrating watching the end of that episode.
I really liked the...
Which I think we filmed the last video we did, I think the night that aired, didn't we?
No, we filmed it like... It was like the Wednesday before or something like that.
Okay.
So it was still a few days until... But yeah, the episode had come out, I think, by the time the video released.
Yeah. Yeah, anyway, they get rid of the herd as we kind of expect them to. And then, unlike in the comics where they jump ahead 25 years, in this they jump ahead 1 year. Which I think puts us, how deep into the apocalypse? 13 years?
We're like 13 years in.
And we see basically our group is in charge of the Commonwealth. There's no more zombies in there. Oh yeah, they funneled the zombies into the estates and then blew up the estates rather than the other way around. It's essentially sacrificing those with the most to lose rather than those with the least.
But they didn't kill the people, though.
They didn't kill any people. Yeah, there was
like they did have time to evacuate. They actually had like an hour or two to set all this up. And I really like that. Like some people probably would have thought that's like an anticlimax, but the thing is, our group basically is not going to die to zombies generally unless like something stupid is happening.
Yeah.
Like, so it's very good that our group just kind of confronts Pamela at the end, because everybody had their plans, you know. Most of our group was working with Mercer to kind of take her down and like do it the legit way. Maggie and Negan were just going to assassinate Pamela.
Yeah.
And then all kinds of people had all kinds of plans. I actually really like that once our group shows up, it's just, guys, just give us the keys and we'll let us drive and we'll fix this. And they do.
Yeah.
With the help of Mercer, because something cool that they establish is the Commonwealth isn't just another Alexandria. The higher-ups are, for the most part, but we'll get into that in a second. But basically, like, the people of the Commonwealth are largely clueless, but under Mercer's leadership, the soldiers are actually quite competent. They're just kind of, like, strung up by that clueless leadership.
Yeah, they have... The soldiers in the Commonwealth are very familiar with how to survive, because, like, they're literally trained to. It's one of those things where it's like it's the difference between like a tactical order and a political order. So like they can like have a strategy on like, oh well, if there's zombies here, it makes more sense to do this. But if Pamela is like, oh well, in order for such and such to happen, we have to do it over here, they'll then have to, because of the hierarchy, they'll then have to kind of jeopardize the whole mission for Pamela's like optics win, rather than doing just what makes the most sense.
Mercer, first of all, I friggin' love Mercer. He is so friggin' cool, and I want to spin off with him. Just because we didn't get enough scenes of him like fighting zombies, I would love to see it. He is so friggin' cool. Like it's, and the thing is, he always delivers like these really downplayed lines, but they're like the coolest lines in the season.
Yeah.
The show even sort of like it's almost comedic, but it still works. Where when they're getting ready to make their move with Mercer before the herd gets in, they're like, all right, Mercer, are you and your people ready? And there's a moment of like silence where he's just kind of like holding the radio and he's just nodding his head and he goes, yeah. And there's a guitar stab.
Yeah.
And like it's the most Duke Nukem thing, but because he's so cool, it's so cool.
Yeah. And also he's just like a great actor. Like I think I mentioned in the last video, I had some issues with like the production of the show. Like it felt cheaper. It felt like the actors didn't care as much. But with Mercer's actor specifically, it really felt like he was like right at home with like everybody else, like bringing like a certain level of like intensity, but also like continuity like between episodes.
He strikes you as like the hidden smart guy, basically, where like he's always like following the letter of the law, but you can tell like he thinks a whole lot and doesn't say a whole lot.
Yeah.
And that's he wears that on his face in every scene he's in, even when he's not the focus of the scene.
That's why I think he would be like a cool protagonist of something.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would want another show because I I'm not gonna be able to even keep up with like the 3 or 4 that they have planned.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of Tales from the Walking Dead yet.
But a movie with Mercer, I feel like would be really cool. I feel like he could be the cool like Geralt of Rivia type character, where he's like the coolest, like the most like capable guy, but like who doesn't speak much, but you can tell. And you know, if he was the protagonist, you get a lot of this. You could tell like there's a lot more going on underneath the surface.
He's kind of like the Commonwealth's Daryl, actually.
Yeah. He's like
But he's much more leadership oriented.
Yeah, but also he's just like. You can tell if you were to actually like get him to like sit down and speak to you, like if things weren't so dire all the time. Like he's probably like really like well read. He's probably thinking a few layers deeper than most people about any given subject.
Yeah,
which is cool because we don't really see that a lot on the show. Is like characters who are like actually like really smart. Usually people have like, and we talked about this too, is like people have like their thing that they do to survive. Sometimes that thing is really smart, but they kind of have to find a way to make that thing work in any given scenario. Whereas with Mercer, I feel like he's like, his like skill set is so varied, and like his like area of knowledge is so varied, he could probably make like anything work. And at the end of the show, after like the year time skip, and all of our people in charge, Mercer is actually the lieutenant governor of the Commonwealth, alongside Ezekiel, who's the governor.
Which I liked. It's a nice twist. I know that in the comics, it was Maggie who became governor, like years and years later.
Yeah.
I think they should. I mean, I know they couldn't do that because Maggie has the spinoff coming up with Negan. But I think Ezekiel is actually a good choice, especially since he wasn't even alive by this point in the comics.
Yeah. Also, with Maggie, I feel like it makes more sense with what they did in the show. In the comics, she never quite went down that like anti-society, like anti-government kind of route that she goes down in the show.
Yeah, I don't think she'd want to be in charge of this large of a group of people in the show.
Yeah. Like I joked last episode, like Maggie is a lot like Ted Kaczynski in the show by this point, where she's just like very much just like, I want to live in the woods with like my stuff, and I don't want anybody interfering with that. Like she's very much over the drama that comes with having people around.
Her and Daryl are kind of like partners in like being aware that they're in a TV show and just sick of all like the writing contrivances that come with that.
Yeah.
Like in the later seasons, they both became kind of meta, where it's like they don't do the whole like moral back and forth. They identify what needs to be done and they do it.
Yeah.
And in that way, I guess they kind of as a pair become the new Rick. And I think that sort of started with. I think that sort of started in one of the really great scenes in season 9 when they both decide, it's at the very end of an episode, that they're going to go kill Negan.
Yeah. And that's actually, that also ties in really well to another good thing that I liked about the finale, is there's just a sit-down scene where Maggie just sits down and talks to Negan, who's just out now, because nobody has any, or I mean, people, this is what the scene's about, people are never going to forgive Negan for what he did. Like, that's just how it is. Like, he beat 2 guys to death with a baseball bat and laughed while he did it. Like, that is going to remain in people's memories forever.
And that's just what we saw. Remember, like, pretty much everybody in our communities knows somebody who was killed either directly by or under the command of Negan.
Yeah. So people, like the thing that Negan did, like, under his leadership,
I think Ezekiel actually let him off easy.
Yeah. Like the things that he did were so bad that, like, no one in our group is really just going to let that go. But it's interesting to see that nobody is interested in keeping him locked in a box anymore either, though. Like it's that thing. It's kind of like the philosophy of Rick in season 4 kind of finally come to fruition, which is like, I don't want to look at you. I never want to see you again. But like, we can still live here. You just go over there. I don't want to see you. I don't want to talk to you. But I don't want to like hinder your ability to do what you want to do, just so long as it has nothing to do with me.
I was also really glad that in that scene they were able to bring back that line from the comics where basically she talks about how, like, when she thinks of Glenn, all she sees is the bat. That's a line from the comics that I really did not think, I'm in trouble here. That's a line from the comics that I really did not think we were going to get a chance to ever get in the show. Nope, run.
Yeah, so a strategy I like to employ in this game, we call it Protocol Back It Up, Terry.
See, the thing is, they would have grabbed me going out the window if I had turned my back to them.
Well, no, you don't turn your back. Basically, just constantly stay backing up.
Well, eventually they back you against a wall. That's the problem.
You gotta bring them out.
That was why I had to... Well, I didn't see them in there. I'm just kind of like killing zombies right now. I'm actually going to have to find a spot to sleep soon. Because it's like 7 o'clock, and there's actually... If I move back towards the areas where I've already killed a bunch of them, there'll be less. But yeah, I'm really glad we got some of those comic ideas to finally come back in at the last second in a way that felt natural instead of forced. Because the show did used to have a problem of doing things just because they happened in the comics.
Yeah. All right, so we got through Maggie and Negan.
You know what I want to talk about now, actually? I want to talk about, like, so we said that some of our characters, 3 of our characters to be precise, did die in the finale. 2 of them were more minor, but then, like, there was a big one. And we'll start with the 2 more minor ones because these annoyed me. So, in the end of the last part, we left off in an alleyway. They were surrounded by zombies. The Commonwealth soldiers were basically penning our group in with the herd, basically to try and kill 2 birds with 1 stone, to redirect the herd to the lower wards and kill our group basically all at once. And the show has always had kind of a problem where it's very bad with spatial awareness. It's very bad with showing, like, what's actually, like, going on in a given scene. And, like, when we'll see one character do something, and then we'll see another character do the same thing, or, like, a different thing in the same spot, but they'll never see each other. And the show has, like, a lot of things. It wasn't as bad with it later on, but, like, it just always had problems like that, where it didn't have that sense of spatial awareness. And in this case, you know, the previous episode ended with, like, they were all essentially allowing themselves to be penned in so that Daryl could have a chance to escape with Judith and get her to the hospital. What we see here is them getting out of it, and 2 people die in this scene, taken down by the herd, and that's Luke, who was part of Magnus' group, and his girlfriend Jules, which I had to look up before this. And she had just kind of been alluded to for like a couple seasons now that she existed.
We saw her a couple times.
Yeah, we saw her a few times. But here's the annoying thing to me. Of everyone that was in that group, these are the 2 that had the absolute least reason to have anything happen to them, because they were the 2 that were wearing the gut suits. All they had to do was nothing. And at the end of the previous episode, we even saw them run out of the herd to join our group. They fed themselves to this herd, basically. Like, it's the dumbest thing. It's just there to add some stakes. And honestly, if there was ever a time for none of our characters to die, it was in this finale, because I thought, you know, the whole thing with, like, Maggie showing Milton the herd, the whole point of that in my mind was that our characters have become the end of the world, that the Commonwealth, for as much as they outnumber us, are a non-threat to our people because our people understand this world and they don't. Our characters work with nature and they're trying to fight against it, and that's why they're doomed. And those themes are still present, but our characters are still getting eaten by zombies, even though they're wearing gut suits, which are very limited gut suits. Every time our characters have done it, like, since the first... Okay, they did it well in Season 1 and in Season 6. Every time they've done it since then, it's like, okay, a little bit of blood on the shoulders, maybe just one little speck on my face, okay, we're good. And that's so dumb. They got really lazy with that stuff.
Yeah. They wanted people to die in the finale, because people are supposed to die in the finale, but yeah, it's one of those things where it's like...
Now, Luke's death scene is actually extremely well acted.
Yeah.
It's very well done. It's just kind of dumb that it's there. Rosita's, on the other hand, who is the other death, the big death, basically of the series, I think was a lot more... Even though it was at the actress's request, it is actually a lot more justified. I think it works a lot better.
Yeah, well, so it serves the function of... She is the one person, like, in the whole show who actually got the, like, I'm laying down in a bed and, like, all my loved ones are there to say goodbye. Like, that's, like, the final death in The Walking Dead is that kind of death. Which is, like, the one thing that, like, none of the characters have been able to get for, like, the entire series.
Except Bob Stuckey, the main character.
Well, he was literally cannibalized shortly before.
Yeah, he definitely got it worse than Rosita, now that you mention it. Yeah, you're right. Good argument.
Yeah, Rosita... Rosita got bit just kind of... It makes sense how she got bit, like the mechanics of it make sense.
It was actually a really cool scene, I think. I'm sure people will dismiss it as cheesy. I actually liked it a lot.
Yeah.
It's sort of similar to a
Her
scene...
strategy made sense.
Yeah, it was sort of similar to a scene that... It was sort of similar to Tyrese in the comics, except he didn't die when it happened, and he also did it in the show, sort of.
Yeah.
I just thought it was cool because it doesn't normally happen. We've actually... these days, whenever one of our characters gets captured, there's not a lot of drama in it because we expect that whoever's taking them hostage is going to like get shot from off screen and then we'll be good or whatever. What I like is that I don't know if we've ever, except for Glenn, no, because even then it's different. I don't think we've ever seen someone fall directly into a herd and survive.
Yeah, even though like...
And get out like by fighting.
Yeah, even though like when you like kind of think about it, especially this late in the game, it should actually be quite easy.
Well, I don't know about easy.
Well, so I would say easy, especially if you have like a weapon like she does and like you're as skilled as she is. When you fall into like the herd like that, they're like real slow. They're not really very perceptive. When you fall into them, you're gonna hit the ground, and you have a good like 2 to 3 second window before they're able to react to do anything. And what they show
it's actually pretty smartly choreographed the way they did it. Like she pushes a bunch of them like against the wall so that they'll be stunned for a second, and then it kind of gives her a lane to move through. Yeah,
because more can't fill in on the side of the wall, so she takes like the lane with the wall so that she can go up and around them, and then she just hops onto a car because they can't really get up there. It's one of those things where, like, she got bit, most likely by one whose teeth just made contact with her back as she fell. Like, I don't think she was, like, bitten.
Yeah. Because it wasn't, like, a big, nasty wound like we normally see.
Yeah, like, it was barely bleeding. It's just that, in our world, that's all it takes.
And after that, we finally got, the whole, like, sitting around the table at Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah.
There were actually a lot of really good callbacks.
And Negan's right outside.
Yeah.
Having, like, not the worst day of his life, but, like, he's being told that he will never get a redemption arc. So.
Yeah, it's kind of... But he kind of accepts that.
Yeah.
Like, it hurts him, but he kind of knew that that's where this was headed.
Yeah. And he's not scared. He knows he's getting a whole other show, baby.
Yeah. Which, I actually should talk about that now while it's on my mind. They should not have announced all these spin-offs yet.
No.
Because one of the best scenes of the show happened in the episode before last, in which basically they were in this work camp, which I really like the idea that like Alexandria is this work camp. Like, it has been turned into a work camp where the dissidents, basically the political prisoners of the Commonwealth, are sent. And outside of that, we see... Oh, I just realized there's a bunch of, like, medals and, like, badges and stuff on this jacket. This is, like, an officer's jacket. Nice. But, yeah, so they go there, and it's kind of a redux of the episode A, or rather, No Sanctuary. In fact, the episode before the previous episode was actually... Maggie delivers a speech that is, when they're getting ready to go to Alexandria, that is basically they're screwing with the wrong people. I can't remember what exactly she says, but that's the sentiment.
She says like we're gonna be like we're all gonna be together again, and Pamela's not gonna know it hit her or something.
Yeah. Oh, Pamela's never gonna see it coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that to me is that is when she becomes the new Rick and basically says this is when Maggie became Heisenberg. And no, she was actually Heisenberg like well before this season.
Yeah, Maggie kind of came back already with this ideology like fully formed.
Yeah, she kind of explained this ideology in the first episode of this season.
Yeah.
But to get back on topic, what I think is on topic, they had this scene where Negan has every reason to, with the characterization we've been given, they went a really cool direction with Negan's redemption arc where he hasn't really changed at all. It's our characters who have changed to sort of see his point of view on more things. And he sort of roots for them simply because he recognizes them as the dominant force and the best bet. Which isn't to say he hasn't changed at all, just that his ideology, the way he does things, hasn't changed. And so we kind of end up in this position where they're not the dominant force anymore, and the question is, what is he going to do? In that moment, he actually has every reason to sell out Ezekiel and crew for his own benefit, not even just for his own benefit, but, for his wife and unborn kid. So the reveal that he is doing like a self-sacrificial thing is actually a big moment for him and for the show, and for everybody else's perception of him, because it's very public and they all see that he's doing this. The problem is that we know he's not going to die because we already know that he's in the Maggie Negan spinoff.
Yeah. And we also find out that it's one of those things where, like, Negan really only did that so that Ezekiel would be friends with him.
Yeah.
Which is very funny. I don't know if it was meant to be funny, but it was very funny. He should have made
Ezekiel some macaroni art of them in a hot air balloon.
Yeah. I do like the way that's all resolved, though, is that Ezekiel basically explains that, like, I don't actually care, like, if you die or whatever. Like, you're responsible for everything I love dying. Like, you are a bad man. But the way he explains it, and this is something that I really like about the whole ending, the way they were able to tie it all together, even though I don't think it is consistent with all of the themes that they were.
That was an alarm.
I don't think, in a way that I don't think was consistent with all the themes they set up in season 11, but I think in a way that kind of fulfills the themes of what The Walking Dead is about broadly, is Ezekiel ultimately ends up, like, putting himself in front of Negan to stop the Commonwealth soldiers from killing him. Not because he particularly cares about Negan, not because he thinks Negan's a good guy or he cares that he would die. It's just because he doesn't want the Negan story to be something at the back of his mind for the rest of his life. Like, he doesn't.
Right.
If Negan dies
one of those things
in
where
that moment,
he wouldn't be able to live with not doing something about it generally.
That, and also, like, if he lets Negan die for him, then, like, Negan is a part of Ezekiel's self-perception. He's a part of his story in his own, like, mind and heart. And he's not going to let him have that.
I'm glad that the show doesn't spell that out. They say exactly how much.
He kind of says it. He says
they spell it out as much as they need to, which is somebody says, "What are you doing?" and he says, "I don't know."
Well, he says that, but no. But I mean, like, Ezekiel says, he doesn't want to spend, like, the rest of his days being bitter or whatever. And I think that kind of it says it in a short way, but it says a lot more than he's specifically
basically
saying.
That wasn't for you.
Yeah, it wasn't for you. It was for me. Which is kind of also, once again, getting closer to Negan's whole philosophy, even if he doesn't realize it.
Yeah. I think the stuff that Negan says, where it's like, you people are better than me, and if you don't, I know you people are better than me, and if you don't realize that, you haven't been paying attention.
Yeah. I
feel like that would have been, like, it's there, it's in the show, but I feel like it would have been better left unsaid.
Yeah. I think it works. I do like that he just, like, says that, is that, like, Negan is a certain way. He's probably not going to change. He acknowledges that way keeps him alive. But, like, he's smart enough to acknowledge that, like, even though he might think it seems stupid, our group acting selflessly as they generally do is, like, it's according to Negan's philosophy, it is a form of transcendence, which is not something he has accounted for. And it's actually, it's the thing that brought him down originally the first time. So it's good to see that, like what we said he was thinking in our last video, he explicitly says is what he's thinking in these last 2 episodes. Which I like when just... They don't need to say it, but I like that it is said. What else happens in the finale? So I'm glad Daryl, or Norman Reedus more broadly, got his finale. I was so glad about this. Because with Daryl, we know from, like, the spin-off news, which it sucks that taints, like the whole perception of this finale. But we know he's going to, like, France, or at least France, maybe even more places, in his show. But I'm glad they didn't... All the opportunities they got to set up the spin-offs in the finale, they didn't take them. So, like, with Negan and Maggie, the last thing we get with them is just her saying she's never going to forgive him. And she walks away. It doesn't set up the show. It just, we know they're both alive, and their stories in this show are over.
Yeah, I'm really happy. Like, that's the thing, is, like, they do set up, like, sort of some of the... They sort of tease the other series without just being an ad for them.
Yeah.
Which I really, really thought they were just going to be an ad.
That was my biggest fear going into this, is that it was the whole episode was just going to be a commercial. And I'm glad it wasn't, like, at all. Even with, I guess to jump to head...
If I didn't know about the spin-offs, I would still be happy with this ending.
Yeah, exactly. And that's even to jump ahead, I want to touch on Daryl before I touch on this, but Rick and Michonne are in this episode, and it didn't feel like unnecessary fan service.
Yeah. What I liked about this episode was that it did actually feature a lot of callbacks, but they felt earned, and they weren't like nudge nudge, hey, you remember this thing from before?
Yeah.
Should we just briefly mention what the original planned ending for this episode was?
Yeah, so the original ending was going to be like an adult Judith and RJ on the same highway heading into Atlanta, and it was going to be in the first episode. Rick is like on the radio in the police car when he's going to Atlanta, and he's like breaker 09er. This is Rick Grimes looking for anybody out there. And then in the finale, they were going to have like RJ like on the radio in like a van as an adult saying it, and the callback was going to be him saying, RJ saying, this is Rick Grimes, right? Here's the thing. What would that do for the story at all, other than just be a callback? So,
yeah,
I'm really glad they had the presence of mind to cut that, because it's one of those things where like it might have been cool to see.
You
but
said
like,
they filmed it, right?
They filmed it.
We're gonna see it at some point.
We probably might see it. Yeah, probably be on the Blu-ray or something. If they even do that at this point, because everything's gonna be on AMC Plus.
Yeah.
But
boo.
Yeah, I was looking. My friend wants to watch it, and I was trying to find the AMC Plus free trial. I think they got rid of it. Now that the show's done, I'm pretty sure they got rid of it.
Yeah, I see. But instead, what they did, which is a lot better.
We're not here to review AMC.
Yeah, that would be a bad review.
Yeah, that's a different video.
They screwed the show from the beginning.
Yeah.
But
AMC was always the main antagonist of The Walking Dead.
I like to think that Pamela represents AMC.
Yeah. But what I was gonna get to is Daryl.
Well, I have something to say just before that. They really. They didn't do like in-your-face callbacks like that, but they did do more like subtle, more earned callbacks, such as having it end with them, all sitting around the table at Thanksgiving dinner.
Yep.
Just as Negan taunted Rick would never happen.
Yeah.
But they didn't. But they didn't like. It would have ruined it. Like, and it's the kind of callbacks that I thought they would do is have that happen and then like play the audio of Negan saying that.
Yeah.
That would have been really lame.
Yeah. And actually, I watched a video, I think it was like an Instagram reel or something with Angela Kang, where she was just going through like all of the callbacks to other stuff in season 11. Season 11, I didn't even realize how like full of callbacks it is. It's just that in season 11, for whatever reason, now they chose to be extremely subtle with them, when in the past they kind of sidestepped that and were as overt with them as possible. But back to Daryl, I like with him, we know he's getting a show as well. But with Daryl, we actually kind of get his best ending. Since like season 3, people have been like asking Norman Reedus like, how do you want like Daryl's story to end? How do you want him to die? And he's always said, and what people have always kind of thought the best answer is Daryl should just disappear one day. He should just go off and we never see him.
He rides off into the sunset.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, I'm gonna go somewhere. He's not going to France. Like, they don't like set up a show. It's just Daryl's just like, yep, I'm going out on more adventures. I've always been going out on adventures. That's my whole thing. I'm gonna go on another adventure. And then he rides off. It's like the ending of The Good Lord Bird almost, how it's just like...
Because Daryl's a wanderer.
Rides
That's always how he's been. He's going to go, like, when one adventure ends, he goes on to the next one.
Yeah. With also, I should mention,
with the vague, broader goal of, like, finding Rick and Michonne.
Yeah. I should mention, Bear McCreary kind of did a perfect job for his entire run in the show, and this episode is no exception.
It actually, the theme that plays, first of all, the whole last 10 minutes to 20 minutes of the show are just like pure perfection.
Yeah.
The soundtrack is definitely part of that, and the show has always had two things that it did really well, and that's casting and soundtrack.
Yeah.
And
shout out to Be Claimed.
Yep, shout out to Be Claimed, the YouTube channel that's been removing most of the background audio for years so we could actually get these tracks because AMC hates money and won't release the soundtrack.
Yep.
Where was I going with it? Oh yeah, it actually sounds a lot like, it reminded us of Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, so that's a whole other thing. Not necessarily the music, or specifically the music when Daryl's riding away is
when he's riding away, and the whole thing, like, up until the end, even starting from the coronation ceremony, where I think Ezekiel's already governor, but he's welcoming Mercer as deputy governor.
Yeah. So what I was gonna say is not necessarily that part. The music when Daryl's riding away is it's like a mix, and this is something that Barry McCreary has always done really well. Like sometimes like the soundtrack can be like kind of like just like ambient noise, and it works well.
During season 7 and 8, there was an issue where there was too much of like the wubs.
Yeah, but that's not even what I'm getting into. Whenever Bear McCreary is tasked with remixing the Walking Dead main theme, he finds a new way to once again make it a banger. So like with like Michonne, like when she left the show in season 10, that song, when Rick blew up the bridge, like every time he's been tasked with making the main soundtrack, like, or like the main theme sound different.
Always the main theme or Mercy of the Living, which I guess you could say Mercy of the Living is the main theme, really. Mercy
of the Living, so the ending song before Rick and Michonne show up is a remix of Mercy of the Living.
Yeah, which for those who don't know, like it's Mercy of the Living was, you remember that iconic scene like in the beginning of the show that everybody knew when he goes back to find like the bicycle girl zombie and like put her down?
Yeah.
That's the original Mercy of the Living, and we've gotten several remixes of it since then in the show.
Yeah. Including basically the last song of the show before the Rick and Michonne. It's like an end credits scene, but it's before the credits. It's just that like the show like officially fades to black on the main story when Daryl rides away on the motorcycle, in an ending that reminds me of a because it's like Fallout, which is pretty much the only reason. Which is an ending that reminds me of the ending of the show The Good Lord Bird, which everybody else should also watch. I believe that's on Showtime. Daryl rides away, fades to black, and then this is a good time to get into because we're going over the ending. Then we see Rick and Michonne writing letters, I think not to each other, but back like to the communities, hoping that each other will see them, not knowing what happened to either of them. And we get to see Rick again. It's been like 3 seasons, like 5 years in real life or something.
And the cool thing about that is they weren't lazy with it. He actually got back into character and like looks all grimy and dirty and like he's been on the run. Like it wasn't just like he stopped by in the studio and they were just like, hey, here, film this real quick.
And what's great is that, so Rick's bit is he's writing a letter and then he hears a helicopter coming by, which, if you recall, he was taken away in a helicopter by a group of ne'er-do-wells.
His story kind of starts and ends with a helicopter.
Yeah. So Rick's like just like along this like riverbed outside of Philadelphia, and he's writing a letter like back to his people generally. He doesn't know if it's going to ever get there, but he's just writing to them just to kind of keep himself sane. And the helicopter comes to like get him. And what's really cool about this is that, like, unlike it just being like a random like fan service scene, like, oh my god, it's Rick, he's back, everybody clap, everybody. It feels like we've picked up in like the climax of like another movie or show.
Yeah.
Where like it feels like he's like to just like pick up again with Rick, and it's like he's on his last legs. Like this is like probably escape attempt number 1,000.
Yeah. And just to take this for a moment,
it feels lived in a way that the show usually isn't.
Yeah, like visually, the whole finale just like in terms of like colors and like, you know, camera work and all that, like visually the finale just looks a whole lot better than season 11 and a whole lot better than previous seasons.
Yeah.
Starting in like season 7 or 8, the show had like a really bland look to it. Like it didn't really have much style. It looked like they didn't really do very much. I think you color graded some scenes in your edit of season 8, right?
I did, yeah.
Which I'm going to bring this up every single time. A couple of people asked to see it. I wish there was like an easy legal way to do it. Yeah. He actually, like, we could talk for hours about all the problems we had with season 8, and he actually re-edited season 8. And it's 1,000,000 times better. He accomplished this by cutting it basically in half.
It's my edit ends up being, I think
it's 8 episodes.
It's 8 episodes, but I think it's like 10 hours because some episodes
episodes are 90-minuters, I think. Or I don't know if they reach 90 minutes. Some are over an hour.
So I think one of them is like a full 90. Yeah.
Yeah, but it cuts like a lot of it.
Yeah.
And it's way better for it. I think you added like different soundtracks to some scenes. Like this zombie's doing some crap right now. Okay, but I killed it in the end. It's way better. I watched season 8 the way it was always meant to be watched in the Vegas Pro timeline.
Yeah.
And it's way better.
Yeah. Luckily, I don't have to do that for season 11, which is very shocking. I was not expecting that by the end of it.
Yeah.
Season 11's ending.
Which isn't to say there's nothing we'd change.
Oh no, well, so that's the thing, is that I would change a lot of season 11. I'm saying that, like, you know, subtracting what I think the ending of a show should be, and judging it off of just like what the writers were going for, I think they kind of nailed it.
Yeah.
Not in every way, but in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I definitely think that the season didn't have, like the finale was great. I don't think it did a good job of having, like, a lot of momentum leading into the finale.
No. It just... By the end of even, like, the second to last episode, you were still wondering where it was going.
Yeah.
Which is not really a good way to do it.
Oh, wait, I just have to bring this up because it's too funny not to talk about. Just because we've kind of already moved on from Daryl and where his story is going. But after we finished watching it, we were all talking about how, like, you know, well, like, they didn't tell us how he's going to end up, like, in Europe, in France. And our mom came up with the joke that, like, you know, Daryl being a redneck, he's going to end up in Vegas, where they have the Eiffel Tower, and he's going to think he's in France, and that's going to be the whole spinoff.
Yeah. That will be a good one. I don't know. It's one of those things. I'm really glad that they kept all their spin-off nonsense out of the main story.
Yeah.
That was like the thing I was worried about, was that they were going to make the ending of The Walking Dead dependent on these other properties.
It would just be a coming attractions.
Yeah. But luckily, The Walking Dead, the series that started in 2010 when I was but a wee lad, actually has an actual ending, which is like the highest praise I could probably give it, given what I expected it to be.
And I really like, now, it when it happens, it sounds kind of weird to hear it come out of Daryl's mouth, but Daryl essentially delivers the thesis to the show to Milton in this episode when Gabriel is going to open the gates, and essentially, like, in that moment, that's basically when Daryl chooses humanity for the Commonwealth. And I really like... It's weird that he's the one to make the final speech of the show that basically delivers the thesis. But I guess he's like Mercer in that way, where he's somebody who, like, thinks a lot but doesn't say a whole lot, usually. And now is when he kind of, like... As he's been the camera of the whole show, he kind of, like, says what he's... I was going to say says what he's learned up until this point, but that's not really true. He says... You know, he ends this by saying, "We ain't the Walking Dead." And that's a callback to, you know, it's not a change in his character, it's a callback to when they were in the barn before Alexandria, and Rick says, like, we tell ourselves that we are the Walking Dead. And he's basically talking about how you just kind of, like, do what you need to do and shamble through life and you'll live. Daryl rejected that right from that moment.
Yeah.
And so it's really good that, like, you know, he and Maggie, their whole thing has always been, they don't do narratives, they just do what needs to be done. And so here, what he's doing is he's essentially rejecting the cynicism that had been building at the end of season 10 and the beginning of season 11.
Yeah. Which I think is probably like as...
Which they kind of show he never actually, you know, for the character that he was, he's never actually embraced that cynicism himself.
Yeah, and that's there the whole time in season 11. Season 11, like, his whole thing, he joins up with the Commonwealth. He's like in the Commonwealth army in season 11 because he's just... It's consistent with his character. He's sick of the moralizing and he's sick of the story. He just wants... It's interesting. Most characters in fiction are written like this. He's just a guy who wants to live comfortably. He wants to be able to go to sleep at night.
He's able to... His definition of comfortable is also a much lower bar than most of us.
Yeah, but, like, you know, he just wants to know that, like, people around him are safe and he doesn't have to, like, spend all of his life on high alert. Which is a luxury he didn't even have before the apocalypse. It's something he's wanted the whole time, and the apocalypse is just kind of slightly... The apocalypse was getting other people closer to him.
It's really nice how... or it's interesting, at least, how when he's working for the Commonwealth, we do see a little bit of his home life, of him, like, going to work and then coming home and taking care of, like, Judith and RJ and Dog.
Who isn't in enough of season 11.
Yeah. At least we confirmed that he is alive in, like, the 1 year later or whatever.
Yeah.
But, apparently not going to the spinoff.
That sucks.
Yeah, but
Dog is the best character in the show. He's the only perfectly morally pure and clean character in the show.
that's true.
And he's killed people.
Yeah, but mostly whisperers, so it's
Yeah.
okay. Because as Aaron would tell you, whisperers aren't people.
Yeah.
That was kind of funny that Aaron is like racist against the whisperers.
Yeah.
Like it came out. It just like
Who did like the least damn person? Or no, that's not true. They killed Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, the Whisperers literally did that. By the way,
That's the most like hardcore, like ultra metal way to introduce a character is to have them literally kill Jesus.
Yeah, that was actually really hot. Like, our group encountered the Whisperers, and then they came back to Hilltop, and I think Maggie asks what happened, and Daryl says Jesus is dead.
Yeah.
That's how you introduce the Whisperers.
Yeah. But that's season 9. Season 9, for the record, is perfect. I actually don't
Season 9 is my favorite season of the show.
Yeah, I don't have any criticisms of season 9 at all. Once again, to watch 9 seasons of a show to get to the best season is a little rough.
That's why it's a hard show to recommend.
Yeah, because it's like, yeah, this is a great show. You got to watch the whole thing. Season 9 is great.
Yeah.
But it's
and
true.
season 7 and 8 are actually quite bad.
Yeah, season 7 and 8 suck. You don't even got to watch those. But season 9...
No, you do.
That's
you
true,
do.
you do.
That's the problem.
Except season 9 kind of retcon stuff. Well, this is all an aside. This has nothing to do with the finale. I'm keeping us on track.
Yeah, okay, so what's next in your notes? What haven't we talked about yet?
So we talked about Rick. I guess with Michonne... So they kind of edit it as if Michonne is heading to Rick, but I'm pretty sure the timeline doesn't really work out with that.
Yeah, they make it seem like...
I think it's more like a you feel the ending rather than like it makes sense literally.
Right, because that's how it feels to her, basically.
Yeah.
Is that, like, first of all, they let her keep the Black Panther armor, I guess.
Yeah, she's got a whole new, like, armor set. It actually kind of looks like, dare I mention it, the armor suit from Ronald Hayes' comic book.
Does it?
It does kind of
I've never
like
actually seen Ronnie Hayes. Ronnie Hayes, for those who don't know, is a YouTuber that we watched like a long time ago. He runs Make a Path Productions, and he would talk about The Walking Dead.
Yeah, I think he does so kind of like less now. Over time, I felt like his analysis began to lack. But that's not important. The main thing is just that I saw her suit of armor that she has in the finale, and I thought like, oh, that reminds me of his book. The character, the writer, has like a cool kind of suit like that. Yeah, it's just cool.
But yeah, I think it's basically because we see her, like, it's Rick narrating, but she has the bag that he throws onto the boat in that finale.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that, like, it could be that he's leaving like a trail of breadcrumbs or whatever, but more likely what I think happened there is that's the bag that she retrieved from Virgil's boat back in season 10. And so that scene of him getting recaptured by the helicopter is most likely taking place like even years before season 10.
Yeah, I don't know how it works because that boat that he threw the bag on like looks like it's like aground and like will never move again. So I don't know how it gets.
I don't know. Virgil's magic. Oh, by the way, Virgil, like, there's a couple of things like this in season 11. Virgil was made out to be like really important, and after the episode with the Ferals, we never see him again.
Yeah, I don't know what. I'm not entirely sure what his role in the story is, other than just to connect Michonne and Rick.
But it's like, why even have him, like, he could have just left or stayed on the island, but they have him, he goes back to find our people. And then, he has his episode with Connie, his little bottle episode. And then, like, we see him once at Alexandria after that, and then never again.
We see him in Alexandria, he vows to have a redemption arc, and then we never see him again.
Yeah. There was actually a really funny scene that went underappreciated in the Ferals episode, where he, like, gives this whole, like, heartfelt speech to Connie, who is deaf, about, like, how he's going to change, and he's always been so bad, but he's going to do better from now on. And at the end of his speech, she looks over and just gives him a glance, like, were you talking?
Yeah. Yeah. It's mostly, I'm not even sure if that was meant to be funny, but, like, I was watching it, and I was like, guy, you realize the problem with what you're doing here, right?
It's so funny. It's really funny. Remember during that episode when there was a moment where Connie was looking through the wall at him, and one of the Ferals was like sneaking up behind him, and she could see that, but she couldn't communicate that to him. And then it went to commercial, and when it came back, he was like on the floor getting stomped on. It was really funny.
Yeah, Virgil ended up just kind of being like a comedic relief character,
Yeah,
which is very
like,
funny.
Unintentionally.
In 2019, because once again, how long these last 2 seasons have been airing. In 2019, 4 years ago, when the season 10 trailer came out at Comic-Con, they compared Virgil to Rick when they were like announcing his character. They did, yeah, they did. And anyway, he did not end up being like Rick at all, except he has a beard, basically. And I guess he bridges the gap between that like 6-year time gap and finding out where Rick is, I guess.
But we didn't need him after that, and the show had every opportunity to have him just kind of fade into the background, and they didn't do that.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that's probably like a scheduling conflict thing, because like, even though it was only one more season, there was like 3 years worth of story or whatever.
Yeah.
But but he's not the only one. Literally, if you go on the wiki right now, the entire Oceanside community is unknown. We never get follow-up on what happened to them.
Yeah, Luke tells us before he dies, feeding himself to zombies for no reason. He tells us that it's been taken over, which we saw. I mean, the way it made it seem is that the Commonwealth was literally going to execute everyone at Oceanside.
Well, Hornsby was leaving it up to his two-faced coin toss.
Yeah. But then we don't see the end of that, and then we see Luke like a few episodes later, and he's just like, oh yeah, they took over. And it's like, all right, well, that's not as bad as it could be.
Like, if you wanted to kill them, you would have him say they killed everyone.
Yeah.
But we never see any of them in the 1 year later either. At least I don't think so.
So instead what happens is just like, we just never see them again, and we just never learn what happened to Oceanside.
Which is hilarious, because we wasted like a lot of season 7 and 8, which had like a really meandering pace. We wasted a lot of that on Oceanside, and they never ended up mattering. Their best story was the disappearing savior workers in the beginning of season 9. That was the one worthwhile story they were in.
Yeah. Actually, we're actually pretty far. Congratulations, everyone. You're not going to have to sit here and listen to us talk about The Walking Dead for 4 hours.
Well, you have to leave in like 40 minutes anyway. You're going to see Glass Onion, right? Oh, we have a visitor in the night.
Oh. Yeah, I'm going to go see Glass Onion.
Oh, we got a bunch of visitors. Oh, we got to go.
That's not good.
We got to go. Oh, it's so dark. I thought I took a flashlight earlier, but I guess I didn't.
Yeah. And Cat's Eyes isn't going to matter because it's raining.
Yeah. Oh, you saw that I took that perk?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a meta build for this, and it always includes
I always
Cat's
take
Eyes.
at least Keen Hearing, because what that does is it enables you to see a sort of semicircle behind you, which is very, very useful. We got to get near a door so that we can actually have some light and kill whatever comes to us.
Yeah. I actually have like an hour and 10 minutes, I think.
Okay, now they're all falling. I can't fight this. I've yet to find a melee weapon that isn't a knife. I found one pipe wrench that was in bad condition.
Yeah, I usually play this multiplayer, so I usually, like, if you have 2 people, one of you doesn't really need a weapon. You just have one person for shoving them to the ground and the other person for hitting them. A favorite weapon of mine is the rolling pin. Because it's basically like a baseball bat, which is like slightly lower durability.
Yeah, I currently have, just for the sake of this video, because I did make this character just for this video, I have skill level up set to like 10 times XP, just so that like we can actually get into combat, and I can just like idly play and not have to worry about it.
Yeah. Just that way we don't have to play Survival Instinct for the 3rd time.
Yeah, and I didn't want to risk like my currently alive character, just like because I'm not really paying attention.
Yeah.
But anyway, since we talked about Oceanside and them not mattering, I feel like I can get onto another of my complaints with Season 11, and it sort of ties back to what I think I just got bit. It sort of ties back to what I was saying. Yeah, I got bit. Well, rip this character. I'll start another one, but see how long I can live. But it sort of ties back to what I was saying about not having good spatial awareness. They also don't have very good time awareness, because at the end of Season 11B, we saw Hornsby. We saw like a montage of Hornsby laying claim to the Eastern communities. So he now basically owns the Hilltop, Alexandria, Oceanside. But then when it comes back in 11C, we see that Hornsby's crew and our group are basically in a race back to the Commonwealth, basically to be the first one to tattle on the other to Milton. And that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, he completely laid claim, completely occupied our communities, and now he's racing back?
Yeah,
and they all have vehicles and stuff, but like they're in town at the same time as our group or on foot. Like, what?
He's in the communities, like, kind of like extrajudicially. Yeah, that one. And like he's there with like a skeleton crew, so it's like, how did you take over?
Well, I guess the idea is that they already like kind of had the clout to do that.
Yeah. Well,
But,
I mean,
like-
so they kind of imply that like Milton always planned on doing that anyway. But like that also like, it feels like what is going on at the Commonwealth never truly like squares with what anyone is saying. So it's like, but at a certain point it doesn't feel intentional. Early on, it's supposed to feel like, it's kind of like that like CIA, like what is the CIA to the federal government thing, where it's like, it's a federal agency, but it's not fully accountable to like the executive branch or whatever. And they were kind of making it seem like that at first, but over time it just feels like they didn't always know what the point of what any given scenario was, and it made it confusing to watch week to week.
Yeah, like, it didn't stop after Hornsby was arrested by Pamela either. Because, you know, essentially they get back, they prove all this stuff happened. Carol had already set up, it's not even out of any kind of, like, kindness to our group. Carol had set up, Hornsby basically to take the fall for the stuff that he and Sebastian had been doing, which is Pamela's son. So of course she was going to throw him under the bus so that Sebastian could like get away with it. And that's just kind of luck. But afterwards, we learn that like all the dissidents are being taken and sent to Alexandria, which is one of like many work camps run by the Commonwealth. Now the problem with that is that I've just been bleeding this entire time. Oh, I do have bandages. But the problem with that is that like it goes down to like some severe structural issues with how they handled Pamela as a villain. And it was interesting to see her become the villain where she wasn't really in the comics. But I still think like in the scene early on in the season where they were at the party and the Commonwealth soldier took Max hostage, basically as a means of getting attention to, like, there's thousands of people in the Commonwealth who are, like, completely dissatisfied with, like, the way you're treating us. And they have a moment where she leans over her shoulder to her aide and says, "Are there thousands?" And then she goes, "Find out." And that was actually a really smart way of doing it because, you know, the Commonwealth is full of very different types of villains from the ones we've seen in the show up until this point. And so to have her be like that, to not be like a straight up, like, secret evil dictator like the governor, but have her just kind of be like an out-of-touch rich person, I thought that was actually a very cool direction to take her. And I thought maybe that like she was going more villainous, like after Sebastian died, which actually would have been very similar to our previous governor, the governor of Woodbury. But that's not the case, because we find out that they have always like been disappearing people. They've always had these work camps. So what was this change of character all about? Like, you shifted into doing this thing you've apparently always been doing? Like, it's such a retcon, like, midway through a season.
Yeah, and it's just out of character is the big problem. Because also, like, when she shoots Judith, like, why is she even there? You know?
She should be, like, her whole character is she wants to be as far away from this stuff as possible.
Yeah.
That was even the case. They even screwed up with Hornsby a couple of times, where, like, I generally like the way they did his character, where he's, like, an ambitious person who doesn't understand the way the world works, and that's why he's no match for our group. Like, he thinks he's really important, but in the end, like everyone else, he is just meat, and he doesn't realize that. But they have a moment on the road back to the Commonwealth when they're trying to see who can tattle on who first, where he takes his gun and charges ahead of the Commonwealth soldiers and rushes Daryl's position. That guy would never do that.
Yeah. It's one of those things, like, I thought that they were going to do, like, a thing with Hornsby where it becomes kind of like a Colonel Kurtz kind of thing, where, like, he was this pencil pusher for a long time, and like when he's like forced to like face the world, he doesn't do what like most characters, because we've had that story before of like people who like don't know anything, who like think they're like the guy, and they end up like kind of like succumbing to the world. I thought it would have been interesting to have him succumb to the world, but in like a much different way, where like he very quickly becomes extremely good at it. Like he like almost like disturbingly fast becomes the end of the world himself, in a way that seems like far more psychotic than anything we've ever seen before. And it to an extent, it feels like they kind of did that, but like not really. And it just kind of seemed like, it seemed like they had like ideas of how they wanted him to go, but rather than like committing to any one particular way of telling it, they just kind of like left those threads there for us to see, rather than like telling a complete story.
That's what it feels like. It's the problem that the show has always had is that they set up a lot of cool ideas, but the structure that they've always had, like even as far back as season 3, is that they spend a lot of time just kind of screwing around in the first part of a season, and then there's like a sprint to the end in the last half.
Yeah.
And so it's always had really weird pacing in that way, and unfortunately season 11 was like no exception. Season 11 is actually one of the biggest offenders.
Yeah. Especially because season 11 is longer. Like they
had an additional 8 episodes.
Yeah.
Now, some people said that the Reaper's arc didn't go anywhere. There are a lot of things that I would do differently to make it more substantial, but I wouldn't say it goes nowhere, because that part of the season is actually meant to establish that our characters have become the end of the world.
Yeah.
It's a way to show that we're done with all the nonsense, because they are a strong group. But what's important is that this is like the first time our group is shown basically just like as a whole making the decision to just straight up like execute people.
Yeah.
One of my favorite scenes of the show is Maggie like making a peace deal with them and then immediately shooting them in the back when they're leaving the peace deal.
Yeah.
Because she knows when you spare a villain, they come back in part 2. Let's skip part 2.
That's so the thing, and like this is esoteric, and like I talked about this in the last episode too, and this only makes sense, I think, to people who like are part of this like specific thing. Not specific thing, people who have read this specific author. The whole like first bit of season 11 kind of reminded me of The Road more specifically, but just like the way Cormac McCarthy writes books generally, which is he presents you a story that's kind of like, it has all of like the underpinnings of like an archetypal, like kind of like standard story, a story you've heard 100 times, right? And through that is able to say something like much more significant about the concept itself than you would be able to if you just did the tropes. And so as a result, with like, it's literally, it's another villain of the week. These guys want our stuff, like, who's the big bad this week? But instead of it being another one of those, it ends up being a commentary about how the show has gone through this cycle over and over again itself. And it ends up being a much more substantial story when you view it through that lens. It's my favorite part of season 11 is the Reaper's story. Even if there are certain episodes that I feel like are kind of lacking. And certain characters, such as Pope, who they didn't really... I feel like Pope is only important because they found a really damn good actor for him. And like he probably wasn't supposed to be that important when they wrote it.
One of the problems that this season had is that, like, just because I'm thinking about the Reaper's story now, is that the Commonwealth didn't feel nearly as big as it should have. They should have just filmed in, like, regular old Atlanta.
Yeah, if they filmed it in just, like, a regular city, like, I get there's, like, production problems with that, but it would have, just, like, the production value would have been better. And they can still have, like, their train station set, but, like, it's just weird. Like, the Commonwealth felt really small when it's supposed to be a city of 50,000, you know?
Yeah, it's like, it's a city of 50,000, but we only ever, like, everything that happens takes place in or in front of this one train station.
Yeah.
And the reality is that I'm pretty sure it's the same set as the prison and the sanctuary.
It is, yeah. The Walking Dead became, like, much more dependent on sets over time, because AMC made the judgment call that it was more about making a profit than making, like, a good show.
They still made, like, literally billions.
Oh, yeah, and then, actually, I won't say specifics
we
about
won't
that.
Get into it. We won't get into that here.
Because I feel like it's entirely possible they take down the video if we mention how that lawsuit went.
Yeah, well, I'm dead. Because I got caught on a door frame.
You're fine. You're immune.
That was actually just a scratch. I would have survived that.
You're one of the immune few. You'll see.
I think on my survival preset, like my custom game preset, I make it so that only bites kill you. So this doesn't actually have a chance to infect. I am, however, already bitten, so it's a moot point.
Anyway,
I'm gonna die in a school.
For more on this subject, look up the Frank Darabont lawsuit with AMC if you want to become upset with the state of corporate power in the United States.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention this. Another thing that I liked about I should cross this off too because we got that. I like that the show ends up being about two people who we meet in episode 4 in season 1, and it's not actually like the two like main characters end up being two side people who you would have been certain were supposed to die early on. So like Carol, like battered housewife, who you literally the first time you see her is in like a wide shot. She's like in the background. Daryl gets like an introduction, but you meet him and you're like, oh Jesus Christ, this guy. And they end up being like the two last people at the end that like the story is about. The story ends on that guy riding away on a motorcycle. And I kind of like how it's one of those things, it's a small thing. It's not, there's no attention is called to it, but it kind of encapsulates what the show is about. In that it's the zombie movie that never ends. And much like in like that 80 like horror movie like thing, like in Night of the Living Dead, this isn't 80s, it's 60s, but like in Night of the Living Dead, the main character ends up being Dwayne Jones, right? He's like a secondary guy who you meet later on after one of the first two people you meet is already dead. And then like the person who you came into the story with ends up not even being there in the end. And it ends up being a side character who it was really about the whole time. They're able to carry on that tradition in The Walking Dead just like through like so many more layers of like hiding that fact because of how long it was.
Yeah, I actually really like... See, here's the thing. I am actually glad that Rick was not around for the last couple of seasons because it allowed the show to be about an ensemble cast.
Yeah.
Which is really what the show is about. And I like, especially in season 11, even like the more minor characters all kind of had a role to play.
Yeah. That's also the thing, right? Is that like the big death of the series. And I even think that's like that's even like a misnomer because I don't think that's the point that like that death is going for. The big death of the series is Rosita, who has been a side character basically the whole time. But even that ties together theme, you know?
Yeah. It kind of rejects the idea of main characters in the end.
Yeah.
Something that I really liked in season 11, and this is going to be like a really short point, but in season 8, now, this isn't actually true in the show. This is only true in Dan's season 8 re-edit, and it is way better for like characterization. But in season 8, Eugene is working. He's like the nerdy, like smart guy character, is working with the Saviors as their bullet maker. And the whole time, our characters are like, "How can Eugene be working with these guys? All right, well, we'll have to we'll have to kill him if we get the chance because he's making bullets for the enemy." In the end, when they're all like about to be annihilated by the Saviors, all of their guns explode, and it's revealed that Eugene sabotaged the ammo production order so that they would all go off and leave the Saviors basically like unarmed in the final confrontation. And he basically saves the day in the end. And a competent writer would make it so that like, because he kept resisting being rescued from the Saviors. And a competent writer would make it so that it was like, he's playing the long game. He was saying, no, you idiots, I'm planning something that is going to win this thing. You just have to, like, trust me or whatever. Now, in the end of the show... I should say that, like, that's not what happens in the show. In the show, he says, like, yeah, I got the idea after the last time you tried to capture me. Which is dumb, because that means that, like, he was working with the Saviors the entire time, and there was no reason for him to do any of this. But in the show, at the end of season 11, he's on trial. Pamela wants to basically make him a patsy to be executed for the death of her son, basically as a means to eliminate our entire group by proxy. And he sort of makes an appeal that is sort of like what the point of season 11 is, which is in line with like rejecting main characters, where he basically says, like, I'm just like some guy, and I was able to make all this difference. Like, any one of you can be the one to make a difference. And he's talking to everyone generally, and it does inspire the crowd. But more importantly, the camera work implies that he's talking to Mercer to basically pull his coup now, and because we know by this point that he's kind of sympathetic, and do something to like save Eugene or whatever. But in the end, he doesn't testify. He doesn't make an appeal, and you think, "Oh no, Mercer, like you weren't brave or whatever." And then it comes time for the execution. They're dragging him through the halls of the prison. They take him to Mercer, who lets him go and like delivers his famous line. In other words, Eugene was saved by a Eugene action. And it actually makes more sense because, like, sure, it's a TV thing that he would, like, he would be inspired and go up and make some grand speech or whatever about, like, how Milton is evil. But he's the one who's actually supposed to carry out the execution. What is Milton going to do if he just doesn't?
Yeah.
This makes way more sense and is way more effective.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, you're watching it and you're like, wow, I guess Mercer isn't... He ain't that guy, pal. But it actually, when you think about it, it's like, oh yeah, Mercer actually has way more power after this. It's actually really stupid to try to, like if he were to actually try to, like, save Eugene in the trial, like, not only would nothing happen... He would be
completely relieved of his duty.
He would be relieved of his duty, and Eugene would still get executed.
Yeah.
So it's
actually better to let him get convicted. And this is what I love about Mercer. He knows all of this, and he doesn't say anything.
Yeah, he doesn't say a word.
He knows that it's way smarter just to let it happen and do what he's going to do anyway. Don't even tell anybody, because they'll try to do some TV stuff and screw it up.
Yeah, the if I say what happens, it won't happen mentality, which is 99 out of 100 times, like, just, like, factual.
Yeah, it is really raining a lot. Actually, I think because I created a new character, I think I just spawned basically into the same rainstorm. I think I never do this. I always start a new world when I die, but I think this is like the moment after I died on the other character.
So I'm out of notes really regarding the end of the season. I feel like the main thing we've hit on here is the fact that they were able to twist but still land the themes of, like, the whole season. Like, they were able to take...
I think my knife got stuck in her.
I've seen that happen. I believe that is in the game.
Because it unequipped it, and I removed one from her.
Yeah. Season 10 and Season 11 became more pessimistic and more, like, cynical. Which was like a turn from the show, because the show was always, like, very, like, aggressively optimistic. And I was glad to see that, even though I don't even think you necessarily have to do this, because this is just a matter of, like, how you want the audience to feel at the end of the show, it was interesting to see that they were able to delve deeper into, like, the pessimistic side of this story, like, really deep at certain times in Season 11, but still were able to bring it back to what the show has been about up until that point by the end of it.
Right, because
without it being based in sentiment either.
Yeah, it kind of started to seem like... Because in the end, like, even though she hasn't been through any of the stuff that our characters have been through, like, she sort of reaches the conclusions that some of our characters had started to reach without having really experienced the hardship that would lead such an attitude to maybe be slightly justified.
Yeah.
And so I think... with that, I think sometimes, like... I mean, I'm not going to spoil other stuff by talking about other stuff in this Walking Dead video, but I feel like something that's becoming more common in media, and it's very true in real life too, is that sometimes the way to get a character to change from their attitudes is to hear somebody else agree with them.
Yeah.
Just to hear how it sounds, you know?
Yeah. And I feel like that was, like, that's, like, the thing that, like, they nailed in Season 11, is that Season 11 ultimately ends up being a story about, like, pure pragmatism, and how that...
It's about one editor's journey to finally discover how to color grade.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the color grading on the show has actually been quite good a lot of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time.
In the end, the show suddenly looked fantastic.
The show used to look fantastic all the time. Like if you watch like seasons like 1 through 6, the show used to just look good all the time. Season 7 and 8, it didn't look good. Season 9, it went back to looking pristine again. Season 10, it kind of dropped off a little bit. Season 11, I feel like Season 11 had like a problem with like their like production philosophy, where it still looked better than Season 8, but it felt like they were making it the same way they made Season 8, which was just to like show what's happening rather than show what's happening in like a filmic way.
To be fair, I haven't seen like more like Blu-ray rips of season 11 yet. I know the show has always had a tendency to look a lot better on home release than broadcast.
Yeah, well, because broadcast has like I think like I don't know if it would be.
It has like
rate.
crazy compression.
Yeah.
And like there were some parts in like especially in seasons like 10 and 11, like some parts were just like absolutely awful looking.
Yeah.
There's a scene, I think it's in season 10, maybe, where Rosita is out, like, outside the walls of Alexandria killing zombies, and, like, Eugene comes and helps her or something. And, like, it looked like a mess on TV. Like, the camera's, like, whipping around, the colors are all ugly, it's, like, you know, like, pixels smearing. And I'm not talking about, like, broadcast glitches, I'm talking about, like, it just looked so compressed and terrible.
Yeah. That's always been a problem with the show, I think, is that they don't always optimize like visually how something looks, even though they should and are supposed to. I mean overall with like season 11 though, like I'm just surprised they tied it all together. I think that's like ultimately if I had like to give like a review, I'm not gonna give like a number rating because that's stupid and shallow, but like, the fact that they were able to tie it all together, I think, is, like, the most impressive thing. Because it was a long season. It had a lot of threads. And in one episode, they were able to tie off, like, the ones you care about, anyway. Like, the Oceanside one is obviously, like, a crazy loose end. What's his name? The guy. Virgil. That's a loose end. There's probably even more that we haven't even thought of.
Luckily, nobody cares about Virgil.
Yeah.
So.
But, like, they tied together the important bits. They left it open so that you could do spin-offs, but you can watch the whole Walking Dead show without ever even knowing about those, and it wouldn't matter.
I yesterday on the treadmill, I watched the first, like, 20-30 minutes of Days Gone By, which was the pilot episode. And there are certain elements that I feel like knowing everything I know now, like, it does land a little bit better.
Yeah. I'm surprised you didn't get hit there.
Yeah, sometimes, like, stupid stuff happens.
I think the main thing that I'm impressed about is how they were able to take all of the themes of Season 11 and the show as a whole, delve into, like the most, like, pessimistic angles of them, but then still, like, right at, the last second, they were able to, like, take those same themes and just kind of say them a different way and just, like, flip the show back to what it always had been. Up until that point, which I think is a very skillful kind of sleight of hand thing to do in the writing, is to have like the theme be the same throughout, and just the way it's said by the characters and like by like what's happening in the show make all the difference.
Yeah. Again, it's doing a lot to save itself just in the final episode.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I shouldn't have to say that. On the one hand, I'm almost glad that it does that, because the fact that it does that makes it land a little better, I think. But also, like we've been saying, there is a lack of momentum leading into the finale.
Yeah. It's by the time like it's like a big confrontation at the gates of like the estates, but we didn't really know about that until the last episode. It's not like everything led there, you know.
Yeah.
But I think it easily could have.
I do like how in the end though, like when our guys are planning to make a move, you know, our group is kind of separated and they're all making their own plans for how to deal with Pamela. And the show isn't even treating it as a question of whether they're going to depose Pamela. It's just a question of who's going to get their way and how is this going to shake out.
Yeah. And then in the end, they're able to kind of all converge and get like the best of all worlds.
Yeah.
because they're all together, which is also another thing that's like just another theme of the show.
Although I will say, like, the Beatlands, I understand why it's there. It works. I'm glad they did it. But in terms of the show not understanding, like, spatial awareness a lot of the time, Pamela is placed under arrest by Mercer, right? She then walks to the fence in an attempt to feed herself to Hornsby Zombie, and it's like, nobody was watching her. Nobody, like, she has been arrested. They were just kind of letting her, like, stand around, and nobody cares that she's doing this. Yeah. I understand they probably don't particularly care if she gets bit at that point.
But it's just malpractice.
Yeah, it's like, she honestly should have been, like, sitting down, like, in the back of a truck or something by that time.
Yeah. I just really like, you know what, honestly? I was gonna make, like, a point. I'm just a happy camper. The Walking Dead had a good ending.
Yeah, suck at Game of Thrones.
Yeah, that was my last note here was eat shit Game of Thrones.
See, there you go. You had your one for the season.
I did.
Yeah. That was the one, like, profanity allowed in one season of The Librarian.
Yeah.
There's probably tons in the Survival Instinct video that I just didn't notice.
Yeah, well, because I just let words fly, and I don't notice unless somebody points it out.
Yeah.
But I try to be on my good behavior here with the few times I've been here.
But whatever, YouTube doesn't care if it's not in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, you're good. It's not going to affect monetization.
No, that's literally when I go to put in like the guidance parameters like for the video, and it's a very long list of things that I have to put in. Usually I just do language 1, violence 1, just like, all right, that covers all my bases. But one of the things I have to consider is like, is it within like the first 30 seconds or 5 minutes of the video?
Yeah. For reference, for people who aren't like into TV shows, Game of Thrones was like this show's like big competitor because they kind of came out around the same time. And Game of Thrones fans were always like, "Ooh, our show's like way smarter written." It wasn't. At times. I don't want to hear anything. I do read the comments on occasion. I don't want to hear anything about this bit. It's just that it's not like the most like geniusly like written show ever. A lot of like the comparison I think was even just like apples and oranges to begin with. But The Walking Dead is not part of the pantheon of shows with garbage endings, is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And Game of Thrones very much is. So I just want to leave it at that. Settle a score that existed only in my head.
Yeah.
And just leave that out there. The Walking Dead has more good seasons and a better ending than Game of Thrones. That's all I'm saying.
Yep.
That's my only point.
It was really funny.
I agree. Game of Thrones Season 6 is perfect. That's true. Everybody knows that.
It was really funny watching people, like... Because whenever you watch clips on YouTube, right, of, like, The Walking Dead, you'll always find that comment, back when The Walking Dead was good.
Yeah.
And as someone who has followed the show, like, literally since premiere night, it's really funny watching back when The Walking Dead was good, like, constantly move further and further up in seasons.
Yeah, it's a sliding scale.
Granted, it tends to plateau off at season 7 and 8, because those legitimately did, like, suck a lot.
Well, people will still call it the good days. I remember back in the day. I dropped my pen. I remember back in the day.
When everyone hated season 2.
When everyone hated season 2. But those are the good old days now. They were not the good old days when I lived them. But they're the good old days now. We hated season 3 for the most part, kind of because a lot of the same reasons as why we were kind of upset with season 11. Is because it kind of meandered in the beginning and then it raced to the end. I remember people hating season 4 when it came out. And now we're at a time when season 4 is like the goated season, which I've always thought until season 9 came out. Yeah. Season 9, I think, is the only season with actual like universal agreement on its quality.
Season 9 actually shared a lot of things with season 4.
Yeah, they're very similar structurally and like even just like production-wise, they both came after like a showrunner got like kind of like moved out of their position and they had to reinvent the show or else it could be like on shaky ground. And they had to do a lot of damage control because like the previous season. And they were able to make it work. And also just like the types of stories they're telling in seasons 4 and 9 were similar.
Actually, while we're on that topic,
I should just mention season 4, like the 4th season of TV shows tend to be great, for the record.
Yeah, it's like a weird thing. Like Dexter had a great 4th season.
Game of Thrones, Walking Dead, Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
Like season 4s are just blessed, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's a show that I know with a bad season 4. Last Airbender only had 3 seasons, so they didn't get there. I don't know. How's Home Improvement season 4?
I don't know.
I don't
know if people watch those shows. Like, I don't know if people know those shows by season.
Yeah. Oh, King of the Hill was great all the way through, so I'm sure season 4 was good as well.
Yeah, I have to watch King of the Hill still.
Yeah. Took me a long time to watch that one.
Yeah, it's like 13 seasons or something like that, right?
Yeah, it took me like 2 years to watch it.
But anyway, to try and get back on topic, so something that I've noted, and I'm not sure how I feel about it, is how every season of The Walking Dead kind of feels like a different show. So, like, season 1 is very, very cinematic. It's got that, like, it's got that Darabont touch, definitely. And you can tell that, like, it has somebody who's, like, really experienced, like, as showrunner. Then comes season 2. I'm not sure what else I would compare season 2 to, but it sort of has a similar feel, but on a much smaller scale. And then season 3 feels much more like, it takes kind of a grayer tone. It feels more like DayZ. It actually has what remains the best shootout in the entire show.
Yeah.
A problem that the show has always had is that the shootouts are not very good, not very realistic. It's everybody going full auto. Nobody's really taking cover. Like, especially in season 8, which was the big war, it's like a lot of the time the saviors don't act like they're trying not to get hit by the bullets that are in the air.
Yeah.
Like, everybody just kind of, like, stands out in the open and dies and sprays full auto at each other.
If I remember correctly, season 11 actually had a pretty good shootout in the bus yard.
Yeah, it wasn't, like, great or anything.
It wasn't nearly as good as in the season 3 one.
Right. Season 3 has a shootout that is fantastic. It feels like something from DayZ, which is the shootout in the prison yard in Home. We see people, like, getting as low to the ground as they possibly can. We see a lot of shots going back and forth without people really getting hit. The gun sounds are all really good and punchy. Like, it's a whole lot of rounds going back and forth. Most of it hits nothing, but it's all very tense because, like, a lot of our characters are in very disadvantageous positions. The people shooting at them are far away, so, like, our guys are taking shots back at them. In the end, I think 2 people die in the entire shootout. But there's, like, dozens or even hundreds of bullets fired. There's a lot going on with, like, the truck crashing through the gates and, like, the driver running away.
It's a good example of a medium to long range shootout, which is what I thought season 8 should have been full of, but instead it was kind of just like close-ups of people shooting guns and you don't really see what's going on.
We have to be very careful to not start talking about season 8, or we're going to go on for hours and you're going to miss your movie.
Yeah.
There's a lot of problems we have with season 8 and a lot of things we'd change. In fact, a lot of things you did change.
Yeah.
But sadly we can't fix, like, the structural issues.
Yeah. And sadly, I'm sorry, I don't think there's any way I could actually, like, show anybody. I could maybe make a list of things I changed, and then you could, re-edit it yourself in the way that I did.
Like instructions, build your own season 8.
Yeah.
Okay, I bit off more than I could chew here. So what else is there to talk about? I feel like we really covered a lot of season 11.
I think we covered the finale. I mean, it's like, just look, so, like, if I had to, like, say it, like, concisely, like succinctly what the ending is, it was a good ending.
Yeah.
I was surprised. It was a good ending. It had a thesis.
I really liked at the end. At first I thought it was Alexandria. I think it is just, like, the outer gate of the Commonwealth when Daryl rides off. There's a problem with season 11. And that's, again, spatial awareness. Where is the Commonwealth? Because a problem that they have is, in season 10, they make a big deal of Eugene has to meet fake Stephanie, like, at the Commonwealth, or not at the Commonwealth, but at a rendezvous point that's, like, between the Commonwealth and Alexandria. And that's stated to be in West Virginia. Now, in the comics, the Commonwealth is in Ohio. Here, they never tell us exactly where it is. Actually, I believe the Commonwealth was a network. Here, it's just one city, which is another downgrade, but, it takes them, like, 2 weeks or whatever to get there, like, by horse and then later by bike. And then during the episode with the Riverbend community, where we saw the Commonwealth, like, killing all the people there, our group from the hilltop runs into it on a day trip. They make it seem like Aaron and Gabriel and crew, they all went there from the Commonwealth, and that was a day trip. And then Maggie's crew runs into them on a day trip from the hilltop, and it's like, so where are they? Like, where are they in relation to each other? It was very inconsistent throughout the entire season.
Especially when all of season 5 is spent walking between like 2 or 3 states.
Yeah.
It's very out of place for a show that like was very much about like the details of like where people are.
Oh, you know, it was a good shootout in season 11, the one at the train.
That one was pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, that one, like...
It was followed up by like a really like weird motorcycle chase.
Yeah, it was like really stupid and it looked so bad and it was so brief where it's like, why did you even do this?
It nearly had an Akira slide, which was always cool.
Yeah.
It's always good. Even though I'm pretty sure like I've seen people like do like breakdowns. I don't think Akira slides are like actually possible to do safely.
Probably
like,
not.
But like, you
Isn't
know.
there like some like parody, like, I don't know if it was a Mel Brooks movie, but it looks like something Mel Brooks would do where somebody does it with a horse.
Do that? That's really hilarious.
It seems like a joke Mel Brooks would make.
Yeah. If not, I mean, he's still around. Mel, we got one last job for you.
Yeah. I'm sure he's doing something right now.
I don't know what the last
Is he retired?
I don't know.
Alright, well, it's 10 o'clock. I don't know if you should...
I don't think we have like much left to really go over. I mean, it was a good finale.
Yeah, I love like that like hopeful version of Mercy of the Living while Daryl rides off basically into this now like gorgeous looking landscape.
Yeah.
Which is in contrast to the more like swampy, like gnarled look after the Rick time skip.
Yeah.
Like, because the whole theme of the show has been, especially the last couple of seasons, has been that the world becomes a better place after the apocalypse. A major theme of this season with the Commonwealth, and even vaguely hinted at in the beginning. So in the first episode of season 11, when they're heading off towards Maggie's old community, they go through the subway, and the camera lingers on some protest signs on the ground that say, like, "Stop Racism Now" or something like that. And what I think that's meant to set up is that the world wasn't so great before. Racism, like, it practically, after the first couple of seasons, it practically doesn't exist in this new world.
Yeah.
Because people who were racist, like, were not fit to survive in a cooperative way.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, and it's like I said earlier, the reason the Commonwealth are the villains of the new arc is because they're trying to do literally what our characters wanted in the beginning of the show.
Yeah. And that's actually, I mean, when Daryl's like explaining, like at the end, like the thesis, I mean, he says it, I think he literally says it in like 2 lines, like the whole thesis of the show is like he sees like the rich people and like the military not letting the regular people into like the safe area. And in that moment he says like your people, like you people are like doing everything like the way we would have done it before. And I think he says like that's the fucking problem.
Yeah.
And then he says we ain't
That's
the Walking
Dead. That's our 2 for the season.
Yeah, my 2 for the season.
Yeah.
But I was quoting somebody, so it's different. And then he's walking up to the gate and he says, "We ain't the Walking Dead." That's literally the whole show summed up in 2 lines from Daryl.
Yeah. Daryl is kind of the C-3PO of the show at this point.
He is, yeah.
Yeah.
Or it's kind of Morgan.
Yeah.
Morgan is kind
just
of the
because he's in
character.
Fear with Dwight.
Yeah.
I actually like Fear. Like, I don't think it's great or anything. I don't think it makes the most of its ideas. I think it tends to do like these huge ideas and then just kind of move on from them on a whim.
Yeah.
But I do find it fairly enjoyable to watch. I like Morgan. I like Dwight. I like Sherry. But
Yeah, those are all characters from the main show.
yeah.
It's funny how they wrote that show.
Yeah, good job, AMC. But what was I getting at?
Something Origins of the Apocalypse series. That's what Fear was supposed to be about.
Yeah.
Now it's the Fallout show.
Yeah. Well, I think they're probably going to ditch that now because they're filming in Savannah.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think. I was going somewhere with this, with like, you know, how the world wasn't so great before, and then it ends with Daryl riding off. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with this. We probably more or less made the point.
Yeah. Overall, that's just like the thesis, and it's the thesis of a lot of zombie media. It was the thesis of the original 3 like Romero zombie movies.
Yeah, the world gets better after the apocalypse. In the end, like. In the end, it's basically showing it as an opportunity to do something different. And, oh, I remember what I was going to say. Yeah, they even, like, not so subtly point this out when when the Oceanside people are being tied up by Hornsby, and he does the thing where he flips his coin up in the air, and the camera shows it flying through the air, and very notably, just the edge of the coin comes into focus that says United States of America.
Yeah.
They're actually kind of, seasons 9 through 11 sort of have, like, a frontier vibe. Like, they almost feel like we've reached, like, an 1800s level of civilization.
Yeah.
And they're kind of, like, starting, like, the whole, like, Federalist debate again in season 11.
Yeah. There's an interesting... I really love this. This is actually my notes for the last episode. We didn't get around to it. The notes just said, Whisperers and Colonialism, ? And that reminds me of a scene in season 10 where sometimes the show has bits like this where it's just, like, pure direction. Where you know what they were going for and, like, you got it. And then other times, like we've listed a lot today, sometimes it really, you just wonder what the hell they were going for. In season 10, there's a moment where Aaron is doing something with Gracie. And he's talking about, like the history of like, the American continent. And, like how everything happened. And he's talking about the Native Americans specifically. And then in the context of talking about the Whisperers, this really lands because of what the Whisperers are about. Is like it's this group with like who are set in their ways who show up at this like long running existing place and they want them to like cease basically. And so it works is because Gracie's like, oh well, what happened to them? Talking about the Native Americans, and Aaron just looks up and they've shown across like the show since we met him. Aaron has been collecting license plates off of cars that he's found. And Gracie's like, what happened to them? The Native Americans, what happened to them? And Aaron just looks up at his collections of license plates, and it's that moment. It's so concise and it's just a visual moment of kind of understanding what like the story the show is getting at. It's like, oh, well, what happened? The world that we live in today happened. It's the acknowledgement that the world we live in today, to an extent, is a cascading series of mistakes. And that's the world that we lived in, and that's the world that we wanted so desperately to get back. But when you lose that world, you can kind of understand, oh, well, if we can do anything, why would we spend so much time getting that back? We were unhappy before. Why would we do the same things over again?
And with that, I think that's actually a pretty good place to end it. I think that's like the most concise way to kind of like bring it all in and show what this series has kind of all been about. So, I think that would be a good spot to stop it if we've been through all your notes, right? Yep. I think we've made every point and then some. So, yeah, I think that's about it. And, I think, if people want it, maybe we'll talk about, like, other topics as well besides The Walking Dead. Because I believe we had a pretty good conversation about, like, the horror genre earlier. And I'm sure that we would have a lot more to say about it. And I really do like this format of us kind of, like, going back and forth. I think it keeps us... I think it keeps it moving. I think it keeps us hitting all different kinds of topics in a way that makes sense. And I think it's just good to be able to like bounce back and forth off of each other. I think we covered a lot of ground that way in an efficient way. So if you like this video, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more creepy and comfy content. If you have any ideas for other videos you think I should do, or other topics you'd like the both of us to cover, the best place to suggest that will be in the comments or at the Discord, which we will link in the description. And as always, I will see you in the next one. You want to say bye?
So long.